Well, an official good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful sunny day in Massachusetts. Spring is finally here. I know that we had a little bit of a taste of summer already, but appreciate the opportunity to have Pierre Lucien here, who is a policy fellow for the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. He is currently over at the University of Oxford, so across the pond, working on his PhD. Pierre has been with DESE for how many years now, Pierre, at this point?
I'm on year 3.
On year 3, my goodness, and has done a lot of outstanding work supporting early college, Innovation Pathways sister program. We're fortunate to be able to leverage his skills and expertise for Innovation Pathways. So invited him to join us today to talk about some early insights. For those of you who are current Innovation Pathways designees, you may have, depending upon your designation date, you may have been able to join us, I think it was last summer, to look at some dashboards, or you might have received them and be able to poke around and see your own data. Well, what Pierre has done, and he will explain certainly his methodologies, is he's able to provide a look at the overall state data for Innovation Pathways. So I would love to also acknowledge that Kelly Cornell, many of you know her from the Center for Collaborative Education. She's a partner in the Innovation Pathways work, is here to support us. But I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Pierre for a presentation, and we'll follow up with some discussion items. And toward the end, we'll have a breakout session where you'll be in a room with some colleagues to talk through some guiding questions. So with that, I will give it to you, Pierre.
All right. So good morning, everyone. As Jen said, my name is Pierre Lucien, and I'm a policy analyst at the Office of Planning and Research at DESE. I do want to say that today's presentation is going to be a descriptive analysis. So we're just going to be talking about what's happening and not necessarily why. That's a good place to start. Before we get started, though, I do want to say that there's a lot of information that I'm going to share during this presentation. So please comment in the chat at any time for clarifying questions or comments so that Jen or Kelly can stop me. It is a presentation, but I far more prefer discussions over lectures. So at any point, please do stop me. I'll also try to pause in between slides to give folks some time to digest whatever that I'm discussing. Okay, so to ensure we're all on the same page, I do want to define some terms that we're going to come across throughout the presentation. Innovation Pathways, of course, refers to our program participants. School peers are students at IP offering schools who do not participate in the program, and rest of state are the remaining students in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Note that these 3 student groups are collectively exhaustive and mutually exclusive. That is, all students in the state are represented, but there is no overlap between the three groups. In the presentation, IP is often in red, school peers in orange, and then rest of state is going to be in purple. And also note that the rest of state group is not the state average because it excludes all schools that offer the Innovation Pathways program. And then the sources from which we retrieve our data are most of you or many of you are familiar with them, or the Student Information Management System, which houses our student demographic information such as race, gender, socioeconomic status. Student course schedule, which of course has course enrollment and course performance. National Student Clearinghouse, which is a database from which we get college enrollment, persistence, and completion information. And then the FAFSA reports, which you all know, lets us know whether or not a senior has completed the free application for federal student aid and when. Next slide, please. Again, I also do want to iterate, please comment and let us know if there are any comments or questions. So as part of the designation agreement, the expectation is that all Innovation Pathways participants will have taken 2 advanced courses and 2 pathway courses by the time they graduate high school. We've only recently started capturing the pathway courses, but we have recorded the advanced courses for many years. Per this slide, IP students took at least 2 advanced courses at a rate that is 16 percentage points higher than their school peers in the rest of the state last year in 2021. That's actually a decline from the previous year, when there was a positive difference of 21 percentage points. Given the low 12th grade enrollment in 2019, I wouldn't make too much of that difference there. I also want to note that we are actually using the State Accountability System definition of advanced course, which may also include college level courses. And this is seniors by the time they graduate, so over the course of their 4 years. Next slide, please. By the way, again, these pauses are deliberate. I just want to give folks time to digest. Is this, sorry, was the previous slide the advanced courses one? Okay. So per the designation criteria, again, Innovation Pathways students will participate in a series of courses and experiences relevant to achieving industry recognized credentials. Now, this may of course include post-secondary credentials earned at a college or university. Therefore, we look at many post-secondary schooling related outcomes, such as FAFSA completion. Of course, the FAFSA completion serves as an indication of a student's intentions to enroll in a post-secondary institution after high school. Per the graph here, IP seniors have and continue to complete FAFSA at higher rates than their school peers during the pandemic. However, the rate at which IP seniors are doing so did decline by 10 percentage points from 59% in March 2021 to 49% in March of this year. Nevertheless, they maintain a 4 percentage point difference relative to positive difference relative to their school peers.
Advance the slide here. Sorry.
No, it's okay. These pauses are not awkward. I'm deliberately pausing to give people time to take in. Okay, so a few times during the presentation, I do highlight economically disadvantaged and sometimes Latinx students. The reason why I'm doing that is because they are the two populations that are most negatively impacted by pandemic effects on educational outcomes. At least that's what our data is suggesting. But again, so focusing on disadvantaged students economically, of course, the seniors completed the FAFSA at particularly low rates, but those who participate in Innovation Pathways completed it at a 7 percentage point higher rate than those among their school peers and the rest of the state for the last 3 years on average. So they actually averaged out pretty well over the last 3 years that they with this positive difference of 7. So FAFSA completion is lower for Latinx students than any other racial group in our data, and it actually became the lowest for those in the Innovation Pathways program in 2022, after a drop of 12 percentage points from the previous year. So with 3 years of college enrollment data, we have the opportunity to graph some trends here. It's no secret that college enrollment has declined it's declined everywhere from Massachusetts to Mississippi during the pandemic. Nevertheless, in 2021, 269, or about 61% of Innovation Pathways graduates immediately enrolled in a post-secondary institution the fall after high school, relative to 53% of their school peers. That's a positive percentage point difference of 8. However, 61% is a decline by 6 percentage points from the year before. Again, 2019 is there, but the count of students is so low from that year, I wouldn't make too much of that. Okay, so where did the Innovation Pathways graduates go exactly? So, well, here are their top 4 destinations. They're actually all UMass. So these are the top 4 destinations for IP graduates. And this is from the previous year, for fall 2021. So those who graduated in spring 2021 and immediately enrolled in college in fall of 2021.
UMass and they're all 4-year institutions.
They're large 4-year public in-state institutions, if that's if you want to go by their various Carnegie classifications. Okay, so if we remember the college enrollment rates for all students, we can see that economically disadvantaged students immediately enrolled in college at lower rates than the non-disadvantaged ones. What I want to highlight, however, as shown in this graph, is that disadvantaged students in Innovation Pathways immediately enrolled in college at higher rates than those among their peers, their school peers, and the rest of the state in both 2020 and 2021. That's a difference of nearly 20 percentage points in 2020 and about 12 percentage points in 2021. Again, we're being very mindful of the low counts here, which is why we're being descriptive. And again, on any given graph, you have both the rate as well as the count, and the counts are at the bottom of the bar. Just to, again, keep things in context. So, for those of you who may not know, there were actually declines in college enrollment in the Commonwealth even before the pandemic, for the exception of one group. The Cinderella story in Massachusetts had been that the college enrollment rates for Latinx students were actually going up. So it's unfortunate to see that this racial ethnic group experiencing the steepest declines across the state. Note though that Innovation Pathways Latinx students immediately enrolled in college at a rate that is 16 percentage points higher than Latinx students among their school peers in 2021, this most recent cycle.
The numbers. We do have I apologize about interruption. We do have a question in the chat of how many Innovation Pathway schools are included in this data set that you've been using, that you're sharing?
All of them.
So everyone who had graduates from the programs, is that right, in 2021 and 2022?
Yeah, so my understanding, so the program, so, schools have students in 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, but these data points that we're looking at only apply to 12th graders. So I guess a relatively small share of IP is represented when you consider that only 12th graders are here. Yeah, but across the network though, all schools are actually represented in this pool.
Great, thank you.
The data is drawn from SIMS, the Student Information Management System, for this particular slide. So it'll be schools that actually reported in SIMS. And the data here can only be as good as the data that goes into SIMS and SES if we're talking about course taking. So just a plug for being sure that whatever you put into the system is a reflection of what you have going on in your school. Otherwise, it will definitely skew this information, and you will certainly have an opportunity to look at your own slides or your own information for your schools at a later point.
Yeah, and I couldn't iterate this anymore, right? So as I can't speak for other presentations, but anything that I ever present or information or data points from the data systems, again, that I highlighted at the beginning of the presentation, which are the Student Information Management System, SIMS, which is kind of where you indicate whether or not a student is a program participant. So if you have a school that has 100 innovation pathway participants, but only 10 are recorded in SIMS, then I only have information for the 10 who are recorded in SIMS. So it is imperative. Data reporting actually continues to be a challenge for our pathway programs over the last several years. So I'm hopeful that it improves. But so if these numbers are, and also too, for this particular graph, this is dissected. This is only the Latinx students, right? So whenever we disaggregate for any group, whether it be race, gender, or socioeconomic group, obviously the number will be even smaller. Okay, so the college persistence data we have available tells us that IP graduates who enrolled in college in 2019 and 2020 returned to college for a second year at higher rates than their school peers, in a similar rate to the rest of the state. Second year persistence, often referred to as retention, is a very important measure in higher education. Obviously, the intention isn't just to get students to enroll, but to complete, but they can't complete if they're not retained. So it's a very important intermediate measure for those who care about post-secondary outcomes for any student. Again, acknowledging the low counts, especially from 2019. And so we don't have 2021 here because they would have only been in school once for 1 year, so for one term, so and persistence requires 2 years of data to be calculated. So those in 2021 are not represented here. So when we look at persistence by economic status, we see that students from disadvantaged backgrounds persisted at lower rates than their non-disadvantaged counterparts overall, but those from innovation pathways persisted at higher rates than those among their school peers and the rest of the state by at least 10 percentage points. And given that, it's important to note that so equitable access to higher education for historically underrepresented groups is one of the guiding principles for the program. So it is reassuring to see that economically disadvantaged students in IP are persisting at higher rates than the non-participants in the school and in the rest of the state. And the last slide that I have here, I believe this is the last slide. When looking at our Black students, those in IP persisted at higher rates than those among their school peers and in the rest of the state. And however, Latinx IP students persisted at a similar rate to the rest of the state, and only 4 percentage points higher than their school peers. So this kind of this is the presentation that I have for you, and I do want to give us some time for Q&A. So I presented quite a few slides. So if folks had comments, questions, or concerns, I very much welcome them at this time.
We're a relatively small group, so if people want to take off their mute function, they're welcome to. I do see there's a question in the chat from Jen Lewis. Let's see. Are innovation pathway students and their school peers statistically similar in terms of demographics?
Not necessarily. So yeah, not necessarily. This is I get where she's going with this. So this is a descriptive summary. So what I'm saying is that those are the actual differences between the two groups. So in some cases they are similar. In other cases, not so much. And the analysis for the impact of these interventions or programs, it's a work in progress. And so at later stages we take some steps to kind of mitigate those potential differences to make it a more appropriate or more comparable or more appropriate comparison group. But for now, we kind of wanted to provide the descriptive summaries disaggregated by group.
A quick question moving forward, is there going to be a way to ascertain students that are going into 1 or 2 year technical colleges and completing that, or students that are going directly into the workforce with their credentials that they've earned and so on?
Yeah, so in the dashboard tool, which is being updated, it tells you specifically the destinations of your students. So there'll be like basically count. So if you have 100 students in any given year that's like graduating from your high school, the graph will tell you, I don't know, 30 went to this institution, 20 went to that institution, 10 went to this institution, or like whatever. In terms of the workforce, at this time, there's no way of confirming whether or not they enter the workforce or what exactly they're doing, but I guess you can deduce, from their college enrollment behavior, what % of them are entering the workforce. But yes, we will know which schools they're attending, whether it be 2 year, 4 year. In fact, we'll know them by name, right? Like in one of the graphs, I highlighted specifically where they were going.
Here from the chat, the size of the cohort for the 12th graders in 2022, I'm assuming that would be 12th graders who were enrolled this year, school year 2021-22. Do you know the end size of the senior class?
I mean, I don't have that information handy, but it's not a difficult, I mean, it's not a hard, yeah, that's information that can be provided.
Thanks. And then Robert Perry asked, is there a way to receive post-secondary retention?
Post-secondary retention. That's what I was referring to when I was, so we've been calling it second year persistence. That's to minimize confusion. So because we're in, we're in K-12, I think oftentimes the term retention is used synonymously with being held back. So we're using second year persistence to indicate the college, continuous enrollment in college.
Michelle from Boston Public Schools, has anyone done school level pre-testing to determine whether we are merely enrolling in the IP? Sorry, my cursor jumping around. Enrolling in IP, the students who are already planning to enroll in college and leaving behind those who had a different plan, such as going directly into the workforce or technical training.
Yeah, no, so what we can't, so if she's asking if we're testing specifically, no, but we can look at baseline test scores or prior achievement, which would be like their 8th grade MCAS scores, and compare it. So this wasn't done for this particular analysis, but it's something that we definitely plan to do in the future and can be done, just like comparing them with peers with similar baseline scores.
At a local level, schools could certainly, through the MyCap process and surveying, sort of get at students' attitudes towards college going and seeing if that shifts during their time in innovation pathways.
Yeah, so to be clear, so I want to make the distinction. So what we presented today is a descriptive summary. I think these questions are, diving into some more inferential, like evaluative approaches to the analysis, which again is forthcoming. And we will have that information for you in due time. So more specifically, what we've done for other initiatives, more specifically with our work with early college, we identify students with similar baseline scores and compare participants to those students. I see more questions coming in the chat, so please keep on reading them to me.
Yeah, so Kelsey from Worcester asks, is there a way to see a breakout of how Innovation Pathways, Chapter 74, and their general student peers compare?
Yeah, so we can compare students across any measure or dimension that is captured in our data systems. I guess, so, for future presentations, right, if there's, this is being recorded, so I imagine the transcripts will be revised and I'll get that feedback and potentially incorporate them in future presentations. So this is why, if you do have comments, questions, or concerns, this is a good time to voice them so that it can inform future iterations of this presentation.
Here, so Matthew asks, who in the school is typically in charge of entering the data into SIMS?
That is a very good question. I'm not sure. Now, can you help me out
Varies.
here?
I think it varies from district to district. I mean, it's someone at the district level. So we
Yeah,
are joined by Niall. Hi, Niall.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the chat to the person who is responsible. Every district has at least one person who's charged of SIMS collection. You can find it on the school and district profiles. I'm going to look up a link and put it in the chat. I mean, usually there's a local, what's called SIS. There you go, Molly. Student Information System, who administrates that type of thing and is in charge. And, that SIS might be, School Brains, or it might be Aspen, or it might be, just there's about 7 different systems that cover about 90% of our kids. So I'll send in a link about who the SIMS coordinator is for each director and just stop talking. Thanks.
Yeah, and I do want to reiterate
Love you.
that data entry or consistent and accurate data reporting has been a challenge for us in our pathway program. So that's a very good question. I'm glad you're asking that question. And to the extent that it's appropriate and possible, I would encourage interacting with this person and speaking about your program, if to ensure that the data is being reported consistently and correctly.
Yeah, thanks, Pierre, for that plug. And Niall, last fall, as well as I think on a couple of other occasions, we have had a data reporting webinar, sort of the how-to and various scenarios to assist with reporting. And we have extended the invitation to the folks who are named as the admins in your district, from that list that should be up to date that Niall is putting in the chat. But hopefully you're hearing it now. And for those of you who are sort of new to this and haven't in the past attended one of those reporting sessions, you'll know to be on the lookout for that. We really want to make sure that data is recorded as accurately as possible, because it has obviously ramifications for state level stuff. And I will stop talking. Thank you, Niall, for adding that. Other questions specifically for Pierre? We do have a breakout planned where you'll be with several peers, and we have guiding questions for that. Give it another minute to see if anything else comes up in this general part of the session. And feel free to always send questions after the fact.
Please send the questions to Jen and she'll compile them and send them.
Screen them for you. Well, while we're doing some wait time, I'll actually pull up the presentation again because I embedded the guiding questions on a slide. So hold, please.
But yeah, even after this meeting, again, questions and comments are very much welcome. It's a way to make this a collaborative process, as opposed to, you're on the grounds, you're at the schools, and this information can inform your decision making and your planning. So please let us know what you'd like to see and how, so that we can work on producing it for you.
All right, so hopefully everyone can see the questions for the breakout session. We do have 30 minutes left in our time together, so it'd be nice if we could spend the next maybe 20 minutes in the breakout sessions. You'll be put in randomly with some colleagues to do that, and if you and your little groups could talk amongst yourselves and maybe designate a person who can be the reporter for when we come back together, it'd be great to be able to hear from each of the groups on your thoughts. Welcome back, folks. I hope that the conversations were good in your smaller groups. I'm hopeful that we can sort of do an around the Zoom room to see if you have anything to share out from your conversations. Let's see, I might go in sort of a random order. Does that sound okay? Let's see, I'd like to call on actually room 5 since you guys came back first. Just have a minute or two if you wanted to share out anything that you've learned, share worthy. Who is a spokesperson?
Jennifer, folks might not know what room number they were, so you might just want to remind who was in the
Right.
room.
Good point. Yeah, room 5, that's Joe, Lisa, Tara, and Tony.
Okay, that was my question. What room are we in?
Yeah, I was like, what?
Right.
Thanks, Sheehan.
So actually, one of the things we ended our meeting on was one of the struggles that I'm starting to see is that I have students that are ready for their internships. We opted for internships over Capstone because we wanted the students to get into the industries and actually get hands-on experience. But next year we have a student that his schedule just doesn't allow him to do the internship because he's taking AP classes and they only meet towards the end of the day. I know the students can do it after school and during the summer, but that also possesses problems with students that work. So our question, which I think would be extremely helpful for a lot of schools, is I know we're supposed to choose either internship or capstone, but would there be a possibility of the students doing kind of a little bit of both? So getting out there and shadowing and being in the career area, but maybe not those 100 hours, but then doing a project based on what they've learned. I think that would help out a lot of districts if they were allowed to do a little bit of both. Is that a possibility?
I think in that instance, the prevailing experience then for the student probably would be a capstone, provided they have the project, the final project at the end.
Okay, so you think choosing the capstone, but then having them do the job shadows throughout their senior year and then, then working on the project as their final. Okay.
I think that's
Okay.
absolutely appropriate. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other
Just
thoughts
to
from?
kind of speak to that, I'm sorry, Lisa, to kind of speak to that, that's kind of the model that I've gone to this year. So we've obviously transitioned to capstone projects because of a lot of restrictions around COVID.
Right.
But we do have some students that were able to be onboarded depending on whatever the entity that they are for internships that they would be going into. Everybody has different restrictions, obviously. So the students that were able to do full-time internships, we did pair them with a mentor in a business industry, and they were part of their capstone project was to check in with that mentor over the course of their final semester. And I forgot the exact number of check-ins that they needed to do, but then they needed to add kind of like what the experience is or whatever their questions were for their professional mentor, and to include that as one of the parts or components of their capstone project.
That's great. Now, are you able to change what you opted to do, whether you want to do the internship or capstone project? Because I know for all 3 of our pathways, we have chosen the internship.
So I've totally just made it capstone projects, and that was totally as a result of the restrictions around COVID.
Right.
We actually changed it last year to capstone projects, but prior to that, it had always been, up until that point, it had always been internships.
Okay. Thank you.
Lisa, in your annual reports, which will be due next fall or early part of fall, I think, yeah, you guys already submitted one of those. I think we'll have an opportunity for you to explain there the shift from internship to capstone. And then when you do, from a data reporting standpoint, in SES, there's actually codes for internship and capstone. You're probably familiar with those. You want to make sure that you use capstone. You code this in capstones.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Thanks, Robert, for expanding on that. Any other thoughts from room 5, Joe, Lisa, Tara, and Tony? Or can we go on to, let's see, room 2 with Emily, Jean, and Misha? You guys appointed a spokesperson.
Yeah, I can go a little bit. So we spoke about one of the more pressing areas of improvement would be readiness, assessing readiness for college and just like technical skills. Like, how do we know that somebody knows that industry knowledge? How are we we have certifications, we have, college classes, but how do we really know they're ready for college coursework?
Jen. Looking down because I'm taking notes by hand. Anybody else from that room want to share thoughts? Jean or Emily? If not, maybe to room 1 with Genesis, Jen Lillis, Michael Browenstein, and Robert. No, Robert, you just spoke, but.
So I kind of discussed a pressing area of improvement. And I was basing it kind of the data reporting from last year. Obviously, I don't have the current data reporting at hand, but one of the pressing issues were the number of post-secondaries that our students are applying to. Us being in Fall River, it seemed that a lot of our seniors were only applying to local schools, obviously Bristol Community College, UMass Dartmouth, Bridgewater State, and then weren't many outside of that. So I think that's a component that we've taken as a school, as a guidance department, as a career academy, and taken the time to kind of address this year overall to kind of expand the applicant pool for different schools in our state. So
Thank you. Anyone else from room 1, Genesis or Lynn? Our Boston folks in the same room.
Well, it's funny because I go by Jen too, but I put Genesis.
Oh,
and
do you?
Jen was here.
It's funny when you
So,
signed in,
yeah.
I saw GEN and I was like,
Yeah, that's why I
now
changed.
I know who it is. Awesome.
But we also did discuss kind of one of my issues personally, and it's just like the whole everything around COVID. When we have any kind of opportunities, a lot of them you need to be vaccinated. And I don't want to pass any lines where like I don't want them to do some. I try to encourage them, but that also means I'm encouraging them to get the vaccine, and that can play a major role. So I don't know if anyone has any advice on how to tread lightly, I guess. I mean, we want them to utilize these opportunities and do what they can for themselves. But we're in tough times where this is what we have to do now. And I think the more I try to get that across, the more it sounds like go get vaccinated. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough position to be in.
Yeah.
I think the other issue that was raised was about work-based learning in a remote environment and the challenges associated with that and the impact that has on students' learning. And also the idea that it was just sort of eye-opening. Someone was saying that, this year's juniors were actually freshmen when the pandemic hit. And that has some kind of implication on, what's this whole learning all about and how they understand the experience that was trying to be provided for them as well. That's sort of probably a little disorienting, and how are they really, it's just one more thing to work through as schools reopen and think about what does work-based learning mean for this coming generation and the skills that they need to be successful.
Very good point.
I appreciate that topic and that question, Michael. And I'm going to put a link in the chat to past events. So in the fall of 2020 and as well as in the fall of 2021, the Innovation Pathways team, including CCE and DESE, supported a webinar around remote work-based learning and virtual work-based learning opportunities. And you can find those resources on the technical assistance page of the website. So sharing that in the chat so that if you haven't yet seen any of the event resources, you can go back and see the recordings and the materials from those events.
Thanks, Kelsey. Cognizant of time, I know we have 4 more minutes. Hoping we can hear from maybe Jan, Kevin, and Pamela next. You guys are room 6, by the way.
Okay, well, what we spoke about, we talked about that none of us were surprised about the performance that's what we sort of thought would happen. However, Dave and, is it Dave? Anyway, the other two people in the room,
Kevin.
sorry, Kevin.
Kevin, maybe.
Kevin and Pam, sorry. They were just awarded their pathways last week. And so we are finishing up our first official year here. And so, you know, we wouldn't have any real data yet to support our thoughts. So that's what we thought about that we expected students to be successful, and it looks like they are outperforming their peers. And I think that it happens when students have a goal in mind, or they can see something at the end. That's what I think. I'm a reading teacher in my past and a volunteer for Literacy Volunteers of America for many years. And so many people will suddenly be able to learn to read when what so many adults want to do is take their driving test. And that's a huge motivator. So I think when people can see what they're going to get, they're motivated. And I think that's a big plus of what kids get out of the pathways. We also, you know, we talked about how we are all doing and what courses we're putting in and so on, which was really helpful, I think, for all of us to hear from each other.
Great. Thanks, Jan. Maybe room 7 next, and then I think we have rooms 3 and 4. So we have 3 groups left. So room 7, that's with Michelle, Christoph, and Addie, and Pierre.
Yeah, we ended up talking a lot about like other data, the outside data of the apprenticeships or workforce or community college as well. But I don't know if we answered all our questions, except that I'm early on it. I've only had one kid graduate from the IP program so far, and he went to community college. And then I have more kids coming in, but yeah, I don't know. Anybody else want to speak up? Because
just one quick comment I wanted to make from our group discussion for actually number 2. What that we agreed upon was the most pressing issue for IP. Sorry, is enrollment.
Yeah.
Enrollment numbers are, as we saw throughout the presentation, right? We have low counts from all the years for just about everything. So a pressing issue for IP moving forward is enrollment. So recruit these students and get them in the programs.
Here. Can we toss over to room 4 with Kelsey, Lydia, Natasha, and Susan?
I can kick us off at least. I took some notes while we were chatting. One of the pieces that we talked about at the end as far as some either maybe pressing areas, but then also places where I think just generally we wanted to dig in a little bit more. For Kelsey in Worcester, it was all around alumni engagement strategies. So ensuring students who graduate the program are staying connected to the school, and that they are able to, I think, track long-term how they're doing. And then similarly, I'm just wanting to include an outcome or an indicator around apprenticeship enrollment and participation in the workforce, just to more broadly capture students' experiences. And then one of the things that we talked a little bit about are some ways that just learning the ways that folks are looking at, I think, enrollment, readiness, and early success in the pathway for 9th and 10th graders. So we focus a lot on post-secondary persistence, but what could we be doing to focus on pathway persistence as well?
Thank you, Lydia. It's excellent. And then the last group, I think room number 3, Jay, Larry, Matthew, and Niall. And I recognize that we are at the top of the hour, so our time is up.
I can be really quick. Do you want me to go? Yeah.
Sure.
So the performance indicators didn't surprise us too much, or didn't. I was the only one that worked directly with students in my group. So I volunteered to be the spokesperson, but basically the indicators didn't surprise us because those are the types of kids taking the advanced courses and they tend to do well. So I was in agreement. It made sense to me. Pressing area, at first I said maybe lack of curriculum, but we kind of weave that into a positive of having the freedom is kind of nice. So I would say enrollment's probably the biggest issue. And then areas of strength is the funding's been great. The fact that these kids can work with state-of-the-art equipment is fantastic. So I thank you for that. That's it.
Thank you all. As always, I wish we had more time together today, but understand that these are early insights. We'll look forward to being able to come back to you to share more. And we have certainly more schools in the mix now. So more schools, hopefully more students, and more of you will be getting your individualized dashboards in the coming months. Pierre, did you want to say anything in conclusion?
I put it in the chat, which was thank you for coming. Thank you for your engagement. And if you have any additional comments or questions, please send them to Jen.
Thank you, Pierre. Pierre is wonderful. We're really lucky to get to work with him. And thank you to Callie for supporting this. As always, it's a pleasure being with you, and we'll get this recording out to you along with the slides.